I'm so sorry I'm late. I'm your date. The front door of Oakwood Steakhouse slammed shut behind her as the snow-laced wind died. For a second, all the noise in the restaurant faded. Marcus Thompson stood halfway out of his chair, his coat already in his hand, shame burning the back of his neck. He had just decided to leave, to go home and tell his 8-year-old daughter that everything was fine, that Daddy just didn't like the food here. But the woman in the doorway was breathing hard, soaked in snow from head to toe, her cheeks bright red from the cold. Her dark hair stuck to her face. Her eyes swept the room, wild and searching, until they locked on his. She took one shaky step, then another, and stopped at his table. "You're Marcus, right?" she asked, voice trembling. "I swear, I'm not usually this late. My car died on I-70, and my phone died with it." Marcus stared at her like she was a dream he'd made up on the long drive here. 20 minutes earlier, he had been sitting across from a different woman in a green sweater, talking like his chest wasn't packed with broken glass. 20 minutes earlier, he'd thought that woman was Alina, his blind date. They had talked about work, childhood, the way grief could sneak up on you in the cereal aisle at Walmart. Then her phone had buzzed, her face had changed, and she had stood up so fast her chair squeaked. "I'm so sorry," she'd said. "I have to take care of something." Without another word, she had walked through a door marked staff only and vanished into the kitchen. Marcus had sat there alone, watching other couples laugh under the warm holiday lights, feeling the wall he'd built around his heart slam back into place. Of course she'd left. Of course he'd misread everything. He should have known better than to think one dinner could change 4 years of being alone. He had just pushed his chair back when a nervous waitress came over and asked if he was waiting for a Miss Carter. When he said yes, she explained that Miss Carter had called from the highway 40 minutes ago. Her car had stalled in the snow. She'd asked the restaurant to tell her date she was running late, that she was still coming. That was when the truth had hit him, heavy and hot. The woman in the green sweater had not been his date at all. He had sat at the wrong table and poured his heart out to a stranger. The manager, Rachel, had quietly let him talk, kind enough not to embarrass him, and then slipped away when she got pulled to the back. Marcus had thought about running for the door, never speaking of this night again. Instead, he had stayed. He had stayed because Brandon's voice echoed in his head, and Zoe's small hands on his cheeks that morning when she'd whispered, "Mommy would want you to be happy, Daddy." Now, the real Alina stood in front of him, shaking under a layer of melting snow, and all he could think to say was, "You walked in this storm for a blind date." She laughed, a raw, breathless sound. "I promised I'd show up," she said, "and I'm really tired of breaking promises." They sat down across from each other, to strangers whose lives were about to split, and bend toward each other in ways neither of them could see yet. Elena's hands shook so badly, she almost dropped the mug when Rachel brought hot cocoa and draped a thick blanket over her shoulders. "We'll dry your coat in the back," the manager said gently. Then she glanced at Marcus with a small, knowing smile, like she had seen this story before and was rooting for the happy ending. "Looks like your real date made it after all," she added under her breath, then slipped away to give them space. For a few awkward minutes, the table felt too bright, too close. Marcus wrapped his big fingers around his water glass, trying to stop them from fidgeting. He wasn't good at this. Before Denise died, dates had been easy. They had laughed at movies, shared fries, made silly plans. Back then, he had walked into rooms knowing his wife's hand would find his. Now he sat across from another woman, and even breathing felt like a test he might fail. "So," Alina said at last, tugging the blanket closer, "I hear there was a mix-up." Her eyes were warm, the kind that smiled before her mouth did. Marcus told her about the woman in the green sweater, how he had walked straight up to a stranger, sat down, and started talking. How the stranger had listened with kind eyes, and hadn't once told him he was wrong. I thought you were. He finished lamely. And then she vanished, and I figured I'd blown it, or scared you away. Alina laughed, softer this time. You didn't scare me, she said. You just talked to the wrong woman. I was busy standing on the side of I-70, freezing and begging my car to start. She told him about the stranger who had finally picked her up. The older couple, driving an old Subaru who had dropped her 2 miles from the steakhouse. Because the roads were getting worse. I walked the rest, she said. I wasn't going to stand you up. Not after your friend talked me into this. Brandon overshares. Marcus sighed. What did he tell you? That you're stubborn, good with your hands, talk more about your daughter than yourself, and that you haven't been on a real date since. She paused, letting him fill in the blank. Since Denise, he said quietly. The name still felt like a cut and a blessing at the same time. He waited for the flinch, the pity, the polite change of subject. Elena's eyes softened. I lost my mom 2 years ago, she said. Cancer, slow and mean. I'm raising my little sister now. She gave a small, humorless smile. I get it. There's a before and an after. And sometimes it feels like the whole world moved on, except you. Something inside Marcus loosened at her words. They ordered food almost as an afterthought. The talk came easier now, flowing in small pieces like warm water, finding its way through frozen ground. He told her about Thompson and Sons construction, about the smell of fresh-cut lumber and concrete dust, about the pride of turning empty lots into homes. She told him about her bookkeeping job at a tiny auto shop, about numbers that always added up, even when life did in single quotes. He mentioned Zoe, how she was 8, going on 30, how she liked to help him in the workshop and always ended up with more sawdust in her hair than on the floor. Elena's whole face lit up at the sound of his daughter's name. My sister Sophie is 17, she said. Sometimes she acts like she doesn't need me, but then she'll fall asleep on the couch with her head in my lap like she's still 10. By the time the staff started blowing out candles on the other tables, Marcus realized he had lost track of the clock for the first time in 4 years. When they finally stood to leave, snow still spun outside the windows, now soft and gentle instead of harsh. Thank you for waiting, Alina said at the door, looking up at him through damp lashes. Most guys would have bailed. Most guys don't have a daughter at home who keeps asking why daddy never goes anywhere, he said, trying to smile. I'm glad you came. He wanted to kiss her right there under the twinkling wreath, but his courage failed at the last second. So he opened the door instead and watched her walk to the rideshare car, her breath a small cloud in the cold night air, feeling something new and terrifying settling quietly next to his grief. The next morning, Marcus woke to Zoe, bouncing on his bed like she was 6 again. Did you go on your date? She demanded, curls everywhere, eyes bright. Was she nice? Did she laugh at your jokes? Did you even tell any jokes? He groaned and pulled a pillow over his head. She yanked it away. Daddy, she said, her face suddenly serious. Did you like her? Yes, he said before he could talk himself out of it. I liked her a lot. That answer seemed to be all Zoe needed. By lunchtime, he had drafted and erased a text to Alina 3 times. Every version sounded either too fake or too needy. Finally he sent, Hey, Zoe and I are making wooden ornaments in my workshop this afternoon. Thought maybe you and Sophie might like to join us? His thumb hovered over the screen, ready to apologize for being weird. The reply came back in under a minute. We'd love to. What time? At 2 o'clock. Nervous energy buzzed in his chest as he wiped sawdust off the workbench for the 3rd time. The converted garage behind his small Denver house smelled like pine, coffee, and a faint hint of motor oil. Zoe had lined up jars of paint and laid little pieces of sandpaper next to each block of wood. We gotta make it look good, Daddy, she said. It's their first time here. When Elena's old Honda pulled into the driveway, Zoe raced to the door. Sophie stepped out first, tall and thin, in a faded hoodie, her long dark hair pulled back in a messy bun. Her eyes took everything in at once: the small house, the workshop, the snowman Zoe had built and forgotten to finish. Alina came around the car, her smile warm despite the winter air. "This is Sophie," she said. "Sophie, this is Marcus and the famous Zoe." "Hi," Zoe said brightly. "Do you like glitter? I mean, I know some people think it's messy, but I think glitter is kinda like happiness. It gets everywhere." Sophie's lips twitched, nearly a smile. "Glitter's fine," she said, "as long as I don't have to eat it." Inside the workshop, Marcus showed them how to clamp the wood safely, how to guide Zoe's small hands away from the sharper tools. Alina listened closely, asking questions that made him feel like what he knew mattered. Sophie started quiet, choosing a simple, round ornament. But soon she was sketching an intricate snowflake design that made even Marcus whistle. "You ever think about engineering?" he asked. She shrugged, pretending not to care, but the way she leaned closer to the pattern gave her away. Zoe painted a crooked star with thick yellow arms, chattering the whole time about school, about her friend Lily who had 3 dogs, about how Christmas lights made her think of angels. Every few minutes, she'd look up at Alina, as if checking to make sure she was still there, still listening. Alina always was. She sanded rough edges, praised Zoe's careful brush strokes, and wiped a green smear off Zoe's nose with a laugh. Watching them, Marcus's chest ached with something almost too big to name. It looked like peace. It looked like a life he wasn't sure he deserved but wanted anyway. When the sky outside turned pink and the workshop grew cold, Marcus walked them back to the car. "Thank you," Alina said quietly, while Zoe and Sophie compared their ornaments. "For today, I haven't seen Sophie this relaxed in a long time." "Same," he admitted. "Zoe usually only gets this excited about pancakes and cartoon marathons." They stood there in the breathless cold, their words hanging white in the air. For a moment, it felt like the world had shrunk to the small space between their winter coats. Then Sophie cleared her throat, and the spell broke. As they drove away, Zoe waved from the porch, her painted star clutched in one small hand. And Marcus realized that for the first time since Denise died, December hurt a little less. 2 days later, Alina invited them over to her apartment to bake gingerbread. The building on Denver's east side was old and a little beat up, but when Marcus and Zoe climbed the stairs, warm light spilled under the door and the smell of cinnamon wrapped around them like a hug. Inside, the small living room held mismatched furniture and a tiny fake tree covered in paper snowflakes. "We made those," Sophie said when she caught Marcus looking. "It was either crafts or watch holiday movies until we lost our minds." The kitchen barely fit all 4 of them, but they squeezed in anyway. Alina tied an apron around Zoe that dragged almost to her ankles. "Okay, Chef Zoe," she said, setting a mixing bowl in front of her. "You crack the eggs, carefully." Zoe cracked the first one with so much force that half the shell fell in. Sophie scooped it out with a spoon and didn't even roll her eyes. "You'll get it," she said. "Took me 3 tries my first time." Marcus and Alina worked side by side at the counter, their shoulders touching now and then. Flour dusted his hands and hers, and once she laughed when he got a streak on his cheek. She reached up without thinking and wiped it away with her thumb, then went pink when she realized what she'd done. He couldn't remember the last time such a small touch had set his heart racing. As the cookies baked, the oven heating the tiny kitchen, the talk turned deeper. Alina asked, very softly, about Denise. This time, Marcus told the whole story. How 4 years earlier, on Christmas Eve, he had been working late at the construction site, trying to finish one more thing so the crew could have a clean start in January. How Denise had taken Zoe to a friend's party in the mountains without him. How ice on I-70, drunk drivers, and bad luck had come together in one bright, terrible crash. He told her about the call from the state trooper, about the blinking lights in the snow. about how he had arrived too late to say goodbye. His voice broke when he said it, but he kept going. Alina didn't cut in or say, "I'm sorry" 100 times. She just listened, eyes shining, hands resting quiet on the counter. Then she told him about her mother, about doctor visits that stretched into years, about hospital rooms that smelled like bleach and fear, about trying to be both daughter and nurse while still helping Sophie with homework. By the time Mom died, Alina said, "I didn't even know who I was without taking care of someone." She looked toward the living room where Sophie and Zoe now sat on the floor decorating cooled cookies, heads bent together. "I still don't, really." Later, after pizza on the carpet and too many cookies, Marcus heard Sophie pulling Alina aside in the hallway. He didn't mean to eavesdrop, but their voices carried. "You like him," Sophie said bluntly. "And Zoe, I can tell." "That's not the point," Alina whispered back. "You're leaving for college soon. I need a stable job, not feelings." "You need a life," Sophie shot back, her voice cracking. "You gave up school for me. You worked 2 jobs for me. I love you, but I don't want to be your whole world forever." Marcus pretended he hadn't heard when they came back in, but the words stuck to his ribs. On the drive home, Zoe held a tin of crooked cookies in her lap and asked if Alina and Sophie could come to the winter festival with them the next night. "Please, Daddy. They make everything more fun." He looked at her in the rearview mirror and knew he was already too deep to turn back. "I'll ask," he said. The winter festival downtown looked like a postcard. Lights hung from every tree, snow sparkled on the sidewalks, and the huge Christmas tree in the square glowed with thousands of white bulbs. Families walked arm in arm, bundled in coats and scarves, the air full of roasted peanuts and laughter. Marcus, Alina, Zoe, and Sophie moved through the crowd like they had always done it. Zoe claimed one of each of their hands, swinging between Marcus and Sophie until all 3 were laughing. They stopped under the big tree to watch the light show. Music drifted through hidden speakers, soft and slow. As the lights shifted from white to gold, Zoe looked up at Alina, her small face suddenly serious. "Are you gonna stay with us?" she asked. Alina blinked. "Tonight, at the festival." "No," Zoe said. "Like, keep coming back. Or are you gonna go away like people always do?" Her voice got smaller on the last words. Marcus's stomach twisted. He hadn't known those fears had words yet. Alina dropped to one knee so she was eye level with Zoe. Snowflakes landed in her hair. "Hey," she said softly, "I can't promise I'll never have to leave a place. Grown-ups have jobs and stuff. But I can promise you this, okay? I don't walk away from people. Not without a fight. And I don't want to walk away from you. Promise," Zoe whispered. "Promise," Alina said, holding out her pinky. Zoe wrapped hers around it and seemed satisfied. Marcus watched them, feeling something warm and sharp in his chest. A promise like that was dangerous, but maybe being alive meant risking that danger. The next morning, Christmas Eve, Alina showed up at his door with a pan and a bag of flour, cheeks pink from the cold. "You said you liked cinnamon," she said, a little shy. "My mom used to make rolls on Christmas Eve. Thought maybe we could try together." Soon the house smelled like butter and sugar and cinnamon, like home and holidays and all the things Marcus had tried to shut out. Zoe stood on a chair, helping them roll dough, her small hands sticky. Flour dusted everyone's hair. When the rolls finally came out of the oven, golden and soft, Zoe declared them the best thing in the whole world, plus infinity. They sat at the kitchen table while Zoe ran off to play. Alina traced the rim of her coffee mug. "I got a call this morning," she said quietly, "from a company in Phoenix. Westbrook Financial Group. I applied to a job there months ago and didn't hear back. They offered it to me today." Marcus's stomach dropped. "Phoenix? Arizona?" "Yeah," she swallowed. 85,000 a year. Health insurance. A chance to give Sophie college without taking out 20 loans. They want me there by January 2nd. He did the math. That was a week and a half. He wanted to say, don't go. He wanted to say, we'll figure something out. But he thought of his crew, of the city contract he had just signed for a big housing project. He thought of Zoe's school and her friends, of how hard she had fought for a little normal. His tongue felt heavy. That's huge, he said instead. I'm proud of you. Elena's eyes filled. I don't want to leave, she admitted. Not now. Not when this finally feels like... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. But I can't say no. I owe Sophie more than that. He reached across the table and took her hand. I get it, he said, his own voice rough. You do what you have to do. That's what parents do. Or big sisters, who have to be parents. They agreed it was better for Zoe not to know until after Christmas, to give her at least one more day of simple joy. But kids have a way of sensing cracks in the world. When Alina said goodbye that afternoon, saying she'd see them soon, Zoe clung to her waist longer than usual. Marcus stood at the door and watched Alina walk down the path, snow crunching under her boots, feeling certain this was what the end of a second chance looked like. Alina and Sophie left Denver on December 26th, their car loaded with boxes and blankets. They texted from the road, promising to stay in touch, sending pictures of rest stop coffee and wide, empty highways. Marcus texted back, simple things, drive safe, how's Sophie feeling? While inside he felt like someone had turned the gravity up. Zoe asked each day when they would see Alina again. He told her the truth he could bear. I don't know, baby. On December 28th, the storm hit. The weather guys had been warning about it all week, calling it the biggest in 10 years. By noon, snow was falling so thick Marcus couldn't see the house across the street. The wind howled. The temperature dropped. The city sent out alerts. Stay home, stay off the roads, emergency vehicles only. Zoe's school closed early and put the kids on buses to get them home before the worst. Marcus watched the time. 2 o'clock. 2:33. No Zoe. His phone finally rang. The voice on the other end was calm and too cheerful. Mr. Thompson, this is the district office. The buses are delayed on I-70 near the pass. They're safe in place, but the plows are stuck. We're working on it. I-70, the same road, the same stretch. Marcus's vision tunneled. He hung up without remembering saying goodbye. In a haze, he grabbed his keys and ran to his truck. The streets were a blur of white. His tires spun as he crawled toward the on-ramp. A state trooper flagged him down, face nearly hidden by scarf and snow. Roads closed, the officer shouted over the wind. No one in or out. We've got crews heading to the buses. You can't go up there. My daughter is on one of those buses, Marcus yelled back, voice breaking. I'm not just gonna sit at home. The trooper's eyes softened. I'm a dad too, he said. If I thought you could help by going up there, I'd move the cones myself. But you'll just get stuck and pull people away from the kids who need rescuing. Go home. Stay by the phone. Marcus sat in his truck, heart pounding like it might tear through his ribs. Snow piled on the windshield, turning the world into a small, dark cave. His hands shook so badly he could barely unlock his phone, without thinking it through. He scrolled to a name he had almost stopped himself from using since Christmas Eve. Alina. His thumbs flew. Zoe's bus stuck on I-70. Same place as before. I can't get to her. I don't know what to do. He hit send and dropped the phone in his lap, chest heaving. 15 minutes later, the phone buzzed. 3 words. I'm coming up. He stared. It didn't make sense. Then the phone rang. Her voice came through, tight but steady. Marcus, we never made it to Phoenix. Sophie got really sick by Colorado Springs. Fever, puking, the whole deal. We checked into a motel to wait it out. She's better now. I'm less than 2 hours away from Denver. I'm going to the bus. You can't, he said, panic spiking. The roads are a mess. It's not safe. Her answer was quick. Those kids are not sitting up there alone, she said. Your little girl is not sitting up there alone. I've already been through the worst with losing Mom. I'm not watching you lose Zoe too. I'm going. Before he could argue again, the line went dead. He sat there in the cab of his truck, forehead on the steering wheel, whispering prayers he hadn't said in years. Prayers for a bus full of shivering kids. Prayers for a woman in a cheap sedan on a mountain road. Prayers that this time, somehow, things would end differently. Hours crawled by. Brandon came over and sat with Marcus in the dark living room, the TV on but muted. The storm still raging outside. Every time a text alert buzzed or the house creaked, Marcus jumped. At 6 o'clock, his phone rang. A number he didn't know. Mr. Thompson, a woman's voice said. This is Captain Ruiz with West Metro Fire. Your daughter Zoe is safe. We've brought the kids to Station 12 as a warming center. You can pick her up there. He was out the door before the call ended. The drive was slow, streets slick with ice and packed snow, but he barely felt the wheel in his hands. The fire station was a blur of red trucks, bundled parents, and silver emergency blankets. He moved through the crowd, breath short, until he saw her. Zoe sat on a bench, wrapped in a blanket, a styrofoam cup of cocoa in her hands. Her face crumpled the second she saw him. "Daddy," she sobbed. He dropped to his knees and pulled her in, holding her so tight, she squeaked. "I'm okay," she mumbled into his coat. "I was scared, but a lady helped us." He pulled back enough to see her face. "What lady?" "She knew my name," Zoe said, eyes huge. She climbed up the snow to the bus door when it got stuck. She talked to the driver and helped push the door open. "She checked on all of us. She told me you were trying to get to me." She stayed until the fire trucks came. Marcus looked around the station, scanning every face. A firefighter nearby saw his frantic searching and stepped closer. "You looking for someone? Dark hair, about this tall?" Marcus said, gesturing. "Green coat, maybe, named Elena." The firefighter nodded slowly. "Yeah, she was here. Drove up behind the plow like a maniac, if I'm honest. Refused to sit in the truck. Hiked to the bus with us. She left about 20 minutes ago. Said she had to get back to her sister in some motel down near the springs. We offered to check her out, but she just grabbed a coffee and took off." Brandon appeared at his elbow, then, breath puffing. "I'll take Zoe home," he said quietly. "Go, you sure?" Marcus asked. Brandon squeezed his shoulder. "Go," he repeated. "She brought your baby back. You don't leave that unanswered." The drive south toward Colorado Springs felt like a dream. The storm finally easing, the sky clearing, too black sprinkled with stars. The highway was still a mess of slush and abandoned cars, but the worst was over. At a small motel off the exit, Marcus's hands shook as he asked the front desk clerk for Elena's room. When he knocked, Sophie opened the door, pale and bundled in a hoodie, a box of tissues under her arm. She blinked in surprise, then stepped aside. "He's here," she called back into the room. Elena sat on the edge of one of the twin beds, still in her damp boots, hands clasped so tight in her lap they had gone white. Her hair was messy, her face streaked with the shiny tracks of dried tears. When she looked up and saw Marcus, her shoulders sagged like someone had taken a weight off them. "Is she okay?" she asked before he could speak. "Zoe, she's home," he said, voice thick. "She's safe. Because of you." Elena shook her head. "Because the plows finally came," she said. I just couldn't sit in that motel and wait, not knowing." Her hands started to tremble. He crossed the room in 3 steps and took them in his. They were ice cold. He held them like they were the most fragile, precious thing in the world. "Thank you," he said simply, "for my daughter, for not turning around." Sophie cleared her throat. There's something else you both need to know, she said. She pulled an envelope from her backpack, the corner already bent from being opened and closed too many times. She handed it to Alina, whose eyes widened when she saw the letterhead. This came 2 weeks ago, Sophie said. Full scholarship, University of Colorado Boulder. Tuition, housing, the whole thing. I hid it. I didn't want you to give up Phoenix for me. But then I watched you cry on Christmas, and then drive into a blizzard for a kid who isn't even yours. Her voice shook. I was wrong. I'm sorry. Tears spilled over Elena's lashes as she read the letter again, even though she clearly already knew every word. Why didn't you tell me? She whispered. Because I'm a selfish idiot sometimes, Sophie said softly, but I don't want you to leave because of me. I want you to stay because of you, because of what you want. Marcus's heart pounded. The pieces shifted in his mind. Phoenix had been for money and safety. Boulder meant Sophie could stay close. Denver meant Alina didn't have to run. Alina, he said quietly, my company needs a real accountant. Brandon's been doing the books, and it's that almost made her laugh. We were going to start looking after the new year. I can't match a giant firm, but between me and the city jobs coming in, we can offer good pay, benefits, real future. It wouldn't be charity. We need you, and we want you, Zoe and me. She searched his face like she was trying to see if he was just offering this because of the snow and the fear and the relief. You're sure? I've never been more sure of anything, he said. I'm scared, yeah. I'm scared of losing someone again, but I'm more scared of living the rest of my life pushing away the one person who walked through a blizzard for my kid. Elena's answer wasn't words at first. She leaned in and kissed him, soft and shaking, tasting like coffee and salt and the second chance he hadn't believed he'd ever get. When they finally pulled apart, both of them breathing hard, she rested her forehead against his. Okay, she whispered. We stay. We figure it out. Together. 1 year later, Marcus sat at the same corner table in Oakwood Steakhouse, hands steady for the first Christmas in a long time. The lights were the same, warm amber. The wreaths still hung from the windows. Rachel, the manager, caught his eye from across the room and gave him a small nod, like she knew exactly what tonight meant. At the next table, Zoe and Sophie whispered and giggled over the dessert menu, pretending they didn't know what was about to happen, even though they absolutely did. Alina sat across from him in a deep green sweater, hair curling around her face, the silver band of the promise ring he'd given her last spring catching the light. In the past year, she had stepped into a role at Thompson & Sons like she'd been born for it. The books finally balanced. The crew got paid on time. Health insurance forms made sense. Sophie had started her freshman year at Boulder, coming home on weekends to fight Zoe for the TV remote and spread textbooks all over Marcus's kitchen table. His small house had grown loud and messy in the best ways. Marcus reached into his pocket and wrapped his fingers around the little velvet box. His heart thudded, but not with the old panic. This was a different kind of rush. The kind that came when you stepped onto a new beam at a job site and knew it would hold. Alina, he said, his voice low so it felt like it was just them in the busy room. Do you remember the night you walked in here soaking wet and told me you were my date? She laughed, eyes bright. I was never so glad to see a stranger in my life, she said. I almost turned around twice on the sidewalk. I'm glad you didn't, he said. I thought my story was over. I thought loving someone again would be betraying what I had with Denise, but you showed me it doesn't work like that. You showed me love isn't a limited thing that runs out. His throat tightened, but he kept going. You walked through a storm for Zoe. You stayed when it would have been easier to leave. You made our house feel like home again. I want to spend the rest of my life trying to give you even half of what you've given us. He opened the box. The ring inside caught the light, tiny diamonds sparkling like the snow that had once tried to break them. Alina's hand flew to her mouth, tears already streaming down her cheeks. At the next table, Zoe let out a small squeal, quickly muffled by Sophie's hand. "Alina Carter," Marcus said, his voice steady now. "Will you marry me? Will you be my partner? Zoe's bonus mom, Sophie's forever sister, and the person I grow old and brave with." "Yes," she said, the word bursting out of her like it had been waiting on her tongue for months. "Yes, yes, yes." The restaurant broke into applause as he slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into a kiss. Zoe and Sophie rushed over, wrapping their arms around both of them in a tangle of laughter and happy tears. Rachel brought over sparkling cider on the house, toasting 2-second chances and brave people who keep their reservations. Later that night, back home in front of the glowing tree, with Zoe leaning against Alina's side and Sophie sprawled on the rug, Marcus wrapped his arms around the woman he loved and finally understood that real love does not erase the pain of the past, but dares to walk through storms anyway and choose hope again.